When I first saw this monument to Elizabeth Church, Craig, Robb, I really thought that they had turned it the wrong way and that it really should have had her father's name on the front, Alonzo Church, because Alonzo Church still holds the record of the longest tenure of any president of the University of Georgia. He served from 1829 to 1859, 30 years. And I doubt that any other president will ever serve that long. But his face of the monument is over on the south side. I was reading her obituary in the Athens newspaper, and that taught me that this monument is really to her. Most women of her era got obituaries that told what affectionate daughters they were, and what dutiful wives and loving mothers, and didn't go much beyond that. But her obituary ran a full length of the page and told of her attainments in life. Her first husband was a graduate of the U.S. Military Academy, and he lost his life in the California desert rounding up deserters. She later married James Robb, who had business interests in New Orleans and in the North. And she was living in the North with him when the Civil War broke out. And so as Confederate soldiers were taken prisoner and taken to northern prisons, she went to the nearby northern prisons and nursed them, and did this throughout the war. And during the course of that, she contracted a disease that took her own life a year after the war ended. Yeah. And so I kept reading the newspapers, and 2 weeks after her obituary ran, there was a little reprint from the Macon newspaper saying that a former Confederate general had suggested that since she essentially gave her life for Confederate prisoners of war, he thought it was appropriate that those former POWs take up a subscription to buy an appropriate monument for her. Not that her husband couldn't afford to put one here, but that was just the appropriate action. When I read that, I called her descendant, John Barra, our former congressman from Georgia, except at that point he had not yet been elected a congressman. And I told John what I had read in the paper, and I said, "Is that how that monument got in Oconee Hill Cemetery?" And he said, "That's what I grew up hearing from my family." So that is how this monument got here. Several years later, when I was bringing a walking tour through and had been asked to have descendants of families standing at the gravestones, I asked John's sisters if they would stand here. And his twin sister, Church Crow, is the namesake of Elizabeth Church. And I did not know that she had inherited things directly from this lady. And while we were standing here, she opened up her hand and showed us a ring that had been crafted in prison by a prisoner who was a jeweler. And he had made it in appreciation of what she had done for him and his compatriots. And it was made of wood, and it had 3 crests on it, 2 on either side and 1 on the top, that he had been able to fashion while in prison. And that gave so much immediacy to this woman's life to see something that had actually belonged to her. And her daughter is buried right over here. She married Pope Barra, and there's just all sorts of history connected with this lot, including the fact that as time has advanced and the space for traditional burials has been used up in these old family lots, that family members have decided to be cremated in order to get in the family lot. And that is true on the back side of this monument. We have a husband and wife whose cremains have been buried here because they want to be with the older family. And that is in keeping with the original idea of the natural landscape cemetery, is that you would have generations of family together. And we have that in many, many lots at Oconee Hill.